My husband's coffin shook. When we opened it, the truth destroyed the family. If you enjoy this story, please like and subscribe to support me and read more family dramas like this one. Your support means the world to me. My husband's coffin shook violently during his funeral. And when we opened it, everything I believed about my 25-year marriage collapsed. There, lying beside Francis's pale body, was a phone containing proof that my own sister and son had been stealing my family's $1.2 million inheritance for years. I stood there in my black mourning dress, surrounded by 200 shocked funeral guests, as the documents and photos on that phone revealed a betrayal so deep it felt like a second death. That morning I had been Amara Okafor, respected widow and matriarch of a successful Nigerian-American family. By afternoon I was a woman with no husband, no trusted family, and a desperate fight ahead to save what remained of my children's future. Before that terrible day, I had lived what many would call the American dream. My name is Amara Okafor, and at 48, I had spent over half my life building a beautiful family and successful life in Chicago after emigrating from Nigeria at 22. Francis and I met during my second year of nursing school. He was already established as an engineer, having come to America 5 years before me. Our marriage wasn't arranged, but our families back in Lagos were delighted when two people from respected families found each other across the ocean. We worked hard for everything we had. In the early years, Francis took extra consulting jobs while I pulled double shifts at the hospital. We saved every penny until we could afford a modest 3-bedroom home in a good school district. Over 25 years, that house had transformed into a beautiful 5-bedroom colonial in Highland Park, with a finished basement, a garden I tended myself, and enough room for our 3 children to grow and thrive. Our eldest, Dio, had always been Francis's pride. At 24, he had graduated from Northwestern with a business degree and worked alongside his father at the engineering firm. My daughter, Falami, 21, was studying medicine at University of Chicago, following in my footsteps. Our youngest, Tunde, was still in high school, a bright 17-year-old who excelled at mathematics and computer science. Francis had built his engineering consultancy from nothing into a firm that employed 30 people. His specialty in water management systems had taken him across the country and occasionally back to Africa for major infrastructure projects. Meanwhile, I had risen to become the nursing director at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, overseeing a staff of 80. Our home was the gathering place for extended family and friends. Sunday dinners regularly seated 15 or more people, with traditional Nigerian dishes alongside American favorites. Holidays were even larger affairs, with relatives flying in from across the country, and occasionally from Lagos. My younger sister Kemi had moved in with us 5 years ago after her divorce. I had welcomed her with open arms, grateful for the help with the house and children while Francis and I worked long hours. She had become like a second mother to the children, especially to Dio, who sought her advice on everything from his career to his relationships. Our retirement plan was secure. Francis had built a significant 401k. We owned our home outright, and his life insurance policy would ensure I was taken care of if anything happened to him. Additionally, there was his father's estate in Nigeria, a compound with several buildings and land that had dramatically appreciated in value as Lagos expanded. The entire estate was worth approximately $1.2 million, to be divided among Francis and his siblings upon their father's death. Old Musa Okafor had passed away just 3 months before Francis's unexpected heart attack. The inheritance paperwork was still being processed, but Francis had been named executor of the estate. As the oldest son, he had been entrusted with managing the division of assets, financial security, respected careers, beautiful children, and a home filled with love. That was our life. I had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. No reason to question the subtle changes in Francis's behavior in recent months. His distraction, his late nights at the office, his increasingly private phone conversations. I attributed it all to stress from his father's death and the responsibilities of managing the estate. How could I have known that behind that facade of the perfect family, secrets were growing like poisonous vines, slowly strangling everything we had built? The first hint that something wasn't right came 6 months before Francis's death, during a family dinner celebrating Dio's promotion at work. "To my brilliant son," Francis had said, raising his glass. Following in my footsteps and soon to surpass me. Everyone cheered. But I noticed something odd, a quick glance between Dio and Kemi. It wasn't the look itself that bothered me, but rather the way they both quickly averted their eyes when they realized I was watching. Later that evening, I overheard a fragment of conversation between them in the kitchen as they cleaned up. "Can't keep this up forever," Kemi was saying, her voice low and urgent. "It's under control," Dio replied. "Dad's handling it." They fell silent when I entered the room, both suddenly very interested in loading the dishwasher. I didn't think much of it then. Families have their secrets, their private conversations. I assumed they might be planning something for my upcoming birthday or anniversary. A few weeks later, I noticed Francis going through old financial documents in his office late at night. When I asked what he was doing, his answer seemed rehearsed. "Just organizing things, my love. With Dad gone, there's so much paperwork to sort through. Can I help?" I offered. "No need to trouble yourself," he said, closing the folder he'd been examining. "Go to bed. I'll be there soon." That night, I woke around 2 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. I found him in his office, on the phone, speaking in hushed Igbo, rather than our usual English. He switched to English when he saw me at the door. "Yes, we'll discuss it tomorrow. Good night." He hung up quickly. "Just business with Lagos," he explained. "Time difference." I accepted his explanation, but something felt wrong. Francis had always included me in family business discussions, especially anything regarding his father's estate. The next morning, I checked the caller ID on our home phone. The late-night call had come from Kemi's cell phone, not from Nigeria as Francis had claimed. That same week, I noticed Dio had purchased a new luxury watch, a Rolex that must have cost thousands. When I commented on it, he shrugged casually. "Investment piece. Mom, the firm's doing well and Dad said I deserved a bonus." I looked to Francis, who nodded in confirmation but wouldn't meet my eyes. The engineering firm was successful, but Francis had always been conservative with money. He had built his business on the principle of reinvesting profits, rather than splurging on luxuries. This sudden generosity toward Dio seemed out of character. Then came the credit card statement with charges I couldn't explain. 3 separate hotel charges in downtown Chicago, expensive restaurant bills for places Francis and I had never visited together, and a jewelry store purchase of $4,200, anniversary present, Francis claimed when I questioned him. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." Our anniversary was still 4 months away. I called the jewelry store, pretending to check on the status of my husband's order. They confirmed a purchase had been made, a diamond bracelet already picked up. But when our anniversary came, no bracelet appeared. Instead, Francis gave me a cashmere sweater, purchased the day before. The third crack appeared when I discovered a new checking account statement in our mail, an account I knew nothing about, in Francis's name only. When I confronted him, his explanation came too quickly. Business account for the Nigerian properties, keeping it separate for tax purposes. Nothing to worry about. I'd been a partner in all our financial decisions for 25 years. This secrecy wasn't just unusual. It was alarming. I scheduled lunch with my close friend Bisi, who had known Francis and me since before we were married. "Have you noticed anything different about Francis lately?" I asked carefully. Bisi hesitated, stirring her tea longer than necessary. "Amara, I wasn't sure if I should mention this." She looked uncomfortable. "I saw Francis last week at the Palmer house with a woman. They seemed close. Kemi?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "No, not your sister. Someone younger. I only saw them briefly, but they were holding hands across the table. The restaurant on our credit card bill, the hotel charges, the missing bracelet. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see." "I'm sure there's an explanation," Bisi said, touching my hand. "Francis loves you." I nodded, but doubt had firmly taken root. That evening, I checked Francis's phone while he showered. There was nothing suspicious in his messages or call log, which seemed strange in itself, as if it had been recently cleared. But in his email, I found confirmation of wire transfers to an account in Lagos, $20,000 sent in 3 separate transactions over the previous 2 months. The emails referenced property renovation costs, but Francis had never mentioned any renovations to me. When I confronted him, his anger surprised me. In 25 years, Francis had rarely raised his voice to me. "You had no right to go through my emails. This is business, Amara. My father's estate is complicated, and you're making it worse with your suspicions." "Why didn't you tell me about the transfers?" I pressed. "That's our money, too. It's my inheritance," he snapped, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry that came out wrong. It's just stressful, handling everything from here. These transfers are necessary to secure the property before we divide it. I should have told you." His explanation was reasonable, but his initial reaction had revealed something important. He was hiding something, and it involved money. The final crack appeared just 1 week before Francis's death. I came home early from work, a rare occurrence due to a canceled meeting. The house should have been empty. Francis at work, the children at school, Kemi at her part-time job. But Francis's car was in the driveway. So was Dio's. I entered quietly, hearing voices from Francis's office. The door was slightly ajar. "She's getting suspicious," Dio was saying. "Mom asked about the watch." "Your mother notices everything," Francis sighed. "But the papers will be finalized next week. Once the transfer is complete, we can—" Kemi's voice interrupted, startling me. I hadn't known she was there. "And if she finds out before then?" "She won't," Francis said firmly. "I've handled the bank statements. She has no reason to check the Nigerian accounts. What about Uncle Ekon? He's been calling more frequently. I'll deal with my brother. He has no proof of anything." I backed away silently, my heart pounding. Whatever they were hiding, it was serious enough to involve active deception, and it concerned the family inheritance. Francis, Dio, and Kemi were conspiring together, and I was the one being kept in the dark. That night, I called Francis's brother Ekon in Lagos, using my cell phone from the privacy of my car. "Amara, I've been trying to reach Francis," he said, sounding relieved to hear from me. "There are discrepancies in the estate paperwork." "What kind of discrepancies?" I asked. "Properties missing from the inventory. Accounts with lower balances than they should have. I've asked Francis for the original documents, but he keeps delaying." Ekon paused. "Amara, is everything all right there?" Francis hasn't been himself in our calls. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I think something's happening with the inheritance, but I don't know what." "Be careful," Ekon warned. "Father's estate is worth much more than Francis has disclosed to us. Over $1 million in total. If someone wanted to misappropriate funds..." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The implication was clear. My husband might be stealing from his own family. I promised Ekon I would investigate and report back to him. I planned to confront Francis that weekend, to demand full transparency about the inheritance and whatever else he might be hiding. But I never got the chance. 2 days later, Francis collapsed at his office. By the time I reached the hospital, he was gone. "Massive heart attack," the doctors said. No warning, no chance to say goodbye, no opportunity to get answers. As I stood by his body, holding his still warm hand, my grief was complicated by unanswered questions. What had Francis been hiding? Was it just an affair as Bissy had suggested? Or was there something more sinister involving the family inheritance? In the days that followed, as we prepared for the funeral, Kemi and Dio were constantly at my side, extraordinarily attentive. At the time, I attributed their behavior to grief and concern for me. Only later would I understand it was vigilance. They were watching me, ensuring I didn't discover what they had been hiding. The morning of the funeral arrived. Hundreds of people would be coming to pay their respects. Francis had been well known in both the American and Nigerian communities in Chicago. As I dressed in my black funeral attire, I slipped a small photo of Francis and me on our wedding day into my purse. Despite my suspicions, despite the secrets, I had loved this man for 25 years. He was the father of my children, my partner in building a life. I couldn't have imagined then that before the day was over, everything I thought I knew about that life would be shattered forever. The Graceland Cemetery Chapel was filled beyond capacity. Folami sat beside me in the front row, holding my hand so tightly it hurt. Tunde was on my other side, his young face stoic but his eyes red from crying. Dio sat next to his sister, occasionally checking his phone despite the solemnity of the occasion. Kemi had stationed herself directly behind me, her hand resting on my shoulder in what felt like genuine support. The closed mahogany casket dominated the front of the chapel, draped with white lilies and a large photograph of Francis in his best suit, smiling confidently at the camera. Pastor Adeyemi was delivering a moving eulogy about Francis's contributions to the community, his generosity, his faithful service to the church. Francis Okafor lived the American dream without forgetting his Nigerian roots, the pastor was saying. He built bridges between cultures, between communities, between hearts. Ironic words, given what I would soon discover. It happened during the final musical tribute, a traditional Igbo funeral song performed by the church choir. A subtle movement caught my eye. At first I thought it was a trick of the light or my grief-stricken imagination, but then it happened again, more pronounced. The coffin was shaking, not violently, but unmistakably. A gentle rocking motion, as if someone had bumped into it. But no one was near the casket. I gripped Folemi's hand tighter. "Do you see that?" I whispered. She followed my gaze, her eyes widening. "The coffin, it's moving." Others had noticed too. A murmur spread through the congregation. The choir faltered in their singing. Pastor Adeyemi approached the casket cautiously. "Brothers and sisters, please remain calm," he said, though his own voice trembled slightly. That's when the movement became impossible to ignore. The casket shook visibly, the flower arrangement sliding to the floor. Gasps filled the chapel. Someone screamed. Tunde grabbed my arm. "Mom, what's happening?" I was frozen in my seat, a wild, irrational hope flaring in my chest. Had Francis been declared dead by mistake? Were we witnessing a miracle? "Open it," I commanded, finding my voice and rising to my feet. "Open the casket now." 2 ushers rushed forward to assist the pastor. I moved toward the casket, drawn by that desperate hope that somehow, impossibly, Francis might still be alive. The ushers struggled with the latch, their hands shaking. When they finally swung open the heavy lid, a collective gasp swept through the chapel. Francis lay there, undeniably deceased, his body prepared by the morticians, dressed in his finest suit. But he wasn't alone. Resting on his chest was a phone, an older model I didn't recognize, and it was vibrating intensely, causing the casket to shake. "What is this?" Pastor Adeyemi asked, looking as confused as everyone else. My body moved before my mind could process what was happening. I reached into the casket and picked up the phone. The screen showed an incoming call from a number labeled simply E. As I held it, the call ended, and the screen reverted to what it had been displaying before, an open email with attachments. The subject line read, "Proof of transfer, Okafor Estate." I tapped the screen, opening one of the attached documents. It was a bank transfer confirmation showing $400,000 moved from Okafor Family Trust to an account listed as D&K Holdings, D&K, Dio and Kemi. My hands trembling, I scrolled through the email, finding more attachments, transfer confirmations, property deeds with altered names, photographs of documents with signatures that looked like forgeries of Francis's handwriting. "Mom?" Dio's voice came from directly behind me, tight with panic. "What is that? Give me the phone." I turned to face my son, this young man I had raised, seeing him clearly now as a stranger.
"What is D&K Holdings, Dio?"
His face drained of color. Behind him, Kemi pushed through the crowd, her expression frantic. "Amara, this isn't the time or place," she hissed, reaching for the phone. "People are watching. Think of the family." I stepped back, holding the phone away from their reaching hands. "Is this why you've been meeting with Francis in secret? You've been stealing from the family inheritance?" The chapel had gone completely silent. 200 people watched as my family began to implode before their eyes. Dio changed tactics, addressing the stunned onlookers. "My mother is overwhelmed with grief. This is a misunderstanding we'll sort out privately." "There's no misunderstanding," came a deep voice from the back of the chapel. A tall man in a perfectly tailored suit moved forward through the parting crowd. "Those documents are exactly what they appear to be. Ikon, Francis's brother. He had flown in from Lagos for the funeral." "Uncle Ikon," Folami said, confusion in her voice. "You know about this?" I suspected, Econ replied, reaching my side and placing a protective hand on my shoulder. I hired a private investigator when Francis stopped responding to my questions about discrepancies in our father's estate. That phone belongs to the investigator. It contains evidence that Francis, Dio, and Kemi have diverted approximately $800,000 from our father's estate into private accounts. Kemi lunged for the phone, her composed facade completely shattered. He's lying. Amara, your own sister would never betray you. I held the phone away from her, scrolling through more documents. There were photos taken through windows, Francis and Dio in deep conversation at a restaurant, Kemi at a bank I didn't recognize, and most damning of all, screenshots of bank statements showing regular transfers to accounts in Dio and Kemi's names. The investigator hid the phone in the casket? I asked Econ, trying to make sense of this bizarre situation. No, Econ said grimly. He intended to give it to me privately after the service. Someone must have discovered his plan and tried to prevent it by hiding the evidence where they thought no one would look. In a coffin, I whispered, the full horror of the situation sinking in, with my husband's body. My eyes found Kemi's, my sister, my closest friend for 40 years. Her face showed no remorse, only calculation. The money was always meant for the children anyway, she said defensively. We just expedited things. Francis agreed it was the sensible solution. By stealing from his own brothers? Econ's voice rose. By forging documents? By hiding the true value of our father's estate? Pastor Adeyemi finally found his voice. Please, this is God's house, and we are here to mourn Brother Francis. There's nothing to mourn, I said, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. The man I thought I married never existed. I turned to the congregation, these people who had come to honor my husband, and held up the phone. My husband, my son, and my sister conspired to steal over $800,000 from our family. They forged documents. They lied to all of us. Gasps and murmurs swept through the chapel. Dio stepped forward, desperation in his eyes. Mom, please. We can explain everything. Dad was protecting us, ensuring our future. By stealing? Falami interrupted, rage contorting her face as she confronted her brother. By lying? What kind of future is built on theft? Tunde had moved to my side, silently taking my free hand in his. His young face showed confusion, betrayal, and dawning comprehension all at once. What happens now? He asked, looking up at me with eyes so like his father's. I looked around at the ruins of my family, Dio and Kemi standing together, united in their betrayal, Falami trembling with rage, Econ grim but resolute, and my youngest son, still trying to understand how his world had collapsed so completely. Now, I said, my voice finding strength in the clarity that comes with absolute betrayal. We find the truth, all of it, no matter who it hurts. I glanced down at Francis's body, lying peaceful and oblivious to the chaos he had left behind. Close the casket, I told the ushers. The man I thought I married is already long gone. As they closed the lid, sealing away Francis's body, but not his secrets, I turned to face what remained of my family. The phone clutched in my hand like a weapon. The perfect life I had believed in for 25 years had been a carefully constructed facade. Now it was collapsing around me, and I would have to build something new from the wreckage. Something based on truth, no matter how painful. Little did I know that what we had discovered in the chapel was merely the beginning. The coffin had revealed one secret, but there were many more waiting to be uncovered. Secrets that would test the very foundation of my strength and reshape the future of everyone who called me family. The days following the funeral passed in a blur of shock, grief, and frantic activity. We had somehow completed the burial service after the devastating revelation at the chapel, going through the motions like actors in a macabre play. The reception afterward was tense and abbreviated, with many guests making excuses to leave early, uncomfortable witnesses to our family's public implosion. Dio and Kemi disappeared immediately after the burial. They didn't return to the house, didn't answer phone calls, and their absence was both a wound and a confirmation of their guilt. Falami, Tunde, and I returned to a home that no longer felt like ours, its foundations shaken by betrayal. Econ stayed with us, taking the guest room that had been Kemi's until her hasty departure. His steady presence was both a comfort and a grim reminder of the battle ahead. The morning after the funeral, I sat at the kitchen table with Econ, examining the investigator's phone more carefully. The private investigator himself, a Nigerian-American former police officer named Adebayo Oladele, joined us, having been contacted by Econ once the chaos at the funeral subsided. "I apologize for the dramatic way this was revealed," Adebayo said, his deep voice somber. "I had intended to give the phone directly to Mr. Econ after the service. When I discovered it missing, I called it, hoping to make it ring." "Who put it in the coffin?" I asked, still struggling to comprehend the violation. "I suspect it was your son," Adebayo replied. "He saw me speaking with Mr. Econ before the service. Perhaps he recognized me or overheard something. He entered the chapel area while the funeral home staff were on break." I nodded, pushing aside the image of Dio sliding the phone into his father's casket, hiding evidence alongside his father's body. It was too painful to contemplate. "Tell me everything," I said instead, focusing on the documents on the phone. "How long has this been happening?" Adebayo spread several printed documents on the table. Bank statements, property transfers, emails, and photographs. Based on my investigation, it began approximately 8 months ago, shortly after your father-in-law became ill. Mr. Francis Okafor began transferring assets from his father's holdings into new accounts before the old man even passed away. Econ's face tightened with anger. While our father was dying, Francis was already stealing his legacy. "Not just Francis," Adebayo continued, pointing to account statements. "These accounts, D&K Holdings, were established jointly by your son and sister. Over the past 6 months, approximately $800,000 in cash and property has been diverted from the Okafor estate into these holdings." I examined the bank statements, noting regular transfers, $50,000 here, $75,000 there, building steadily over months. How did they think they would get away with this? Surely the other family members would notice. They were relying on distance and confusion, Econ explained. Most of the family is in Nigeria. The estate is complex, with properties and accounts spread across Lagos, Abuja, and London. Francis, as executor, had legitimate access to everything. He was providing doctored documents to the rest of us, showing much smaller values than actually existed. Folemi had entered the kitchen silently, still in her pajamas despite it being nearly noon. "So Dad was a thief," she said flatly, pouring herself coffee with a hand that trembled slightly. "And Dio and Aunt Kemi?" "Yes," I confirmed, seeing no value in softening the truth. "They've stolen approximately $800,000 from your grandfather's estate. Money that was meant to be divided among your father and his siblings. But why?" Tunda asked, appearing behind his sister. At 17, he looked both younger than his years in his confusion and older in his grief. "We're not poor. Why would they steal?" Adebayo cleared his throat. "There's more to this than simple theft. Your brother and aunt have made some concerning investments." He pulled out another set of documents, investment reports, property purchases, and what appeared to be gambling debts. Dio has accumulated significant gambling debts in the last year, approximately $50,000. He's been using estate money to cover these losses and to invest in high-risk ventures that have largely failed. I stared at the evidence of my son's secret life, remembering the Rolex watch, the new car, the confident explanations about business investments. All lies built on stolen money. "And Kemi?" I asked, almost afraid to hear more about my sister's betrayal. "Your sister has purchased 3 properties in Lagos under the D&K Holdings name," Adebayo explained. "She's also transferred significant sums to a man named Joseph Ademola." The name struck me like a physical blow. "Joseph is Kemi's ex-husband." "Ex-husband?" Econ looked puzzled. "According to my sources, they're still legally married." The room spun around me as another layer of deception was revealed. Kemi had claimed to be divorced 5 years ago when she moved in with us. I'd never questioned it, never asked to see divorce papers, never doubted my own sister's word. "There's one more thing you should know," Adebayo said hesitantly, glancing at the children. "It concerns your husband and may be difficult to hear." "We need all the truth," I insisted. "No more secrets." Adebayo nodded, pulling out a final set of photographs. They showed Frances with a young woman, perhaps in her early 30s. They were entering a hotel, his arm around her waist. Another showed them dining at an upscale restaurant, holding hands across the table. The woman Bisi had seen. Her name is Nkechi Okonkwo, Adebayo said quietly. She's a financial advisor at Lagos International Bank. From what I've gathered, they've been involved for at least 2 years. 2 years. The affair had begun long before the inheritance theft. This wasn't a recent moral failing, but a long-term deception. Did she help them move the money? Ikon asked, his voice hard. Yes, she facilitated many of the transfers, helping them establish the offshore accounts and shell companies that made tracking the funds difficult. I stood abruptly, needing movement to process this avalanche of betrayals. My husband's infidelity was painful, but somehow less shocking than the calculated financial conspiracy. The man I had loved, the father of my children, had been systematically betraying not just me, but his entire family, recruiting our son and my sister into his scheme. We need to act quickly, Ikon said, his voice breaking through my painful reverie. They will be moving the remaining funds now that they know we have evidence. What can we do? Folami asked, sitting beside her uncle, her young face determined through her pain. They've already taken so much. We fight back, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. We recover what was stolen, not just for us, but for everyone they betrayed. Adebayo nodded approvingly. I've already filed preliminary reports with the financial crimes units in both the U.S. and Nigeria. With your permission, Mrs. Okafor, I can contact a friend at the FBI who specializes in international financial crimes. Do it, I said without hesitation. And I want accounts frozen, properties secured, whatever it takes. That's already in progress, Ikon assured me. But we need more evidence to build a complete case. Bank records, communication between the conspirators, proof of forged signatures. I thought about Francis's home office, untouched since his death. We start there, I decided. Francis kept meticulous records. Even in deception, he would have documented everything. The next hours were spent systematically searching the house. Francis's office yielded immediate results. A hidden safe behind a bookcase contained a laptop we'd never seen before, unlocked with a password that proved to be my sister's birthday. Inside were spreadsheets detailing the full extent of the conspiracy. The laptop revealed that the actual value of Musa Okafor's estate was not $1.2 million, as we had been told, but nearly $2 million. Francis, as executor, had concealed almost half the value from his siblings, funneling the hidden portion to accounts controlled by himself, Dio, and Kemi. Most disturbing were emails between Francis and Dio, discussing how to forge Ikon's signature on property transfer documents. My son had not been an unwilling participant or a follower in this scheme. He had been an enthusiastic architect of fraud. He learned from the master, Ikon said bitterly, as we reviewed an email where Francis praised Dio's perfect forgery of his uncle's signature. Meanwhile, Folami had discovered something in Kemi's hastily abandoned room, a notebook hidden beneath the mattress containing account numbers, passwords, and a list of dates and amounts that matched perfectly with the stolen funds. Tunde, silent but observant throughout our search, made perhaps the most valuable discovery. As the family's computer expert, he located a hidden partition on Francis's main computer containing backup copies of all the fraudulent documents, including files showing the original documents alongside their forged versions. Dad was thorough, Tunde said, his voice hollow as he pulled up the files. He kept evidence of his own crimes. He never expected to die, I replied, placing a hand on my youngest son's shoulder. He thought he had time to cover his tracks completely. By evening, we had assembled a damning collection of evidence, financial records, forged documents, emails detailing the conspiracy, and even recorded phone conversations that Francis had inexplicably saved, perhaps as insurance against his co-conspirators. Adebayo arrived with a colleague from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, an agent named Melissa Chen, who reviewed our evidence with professional efficiency. This is a solid case, she concluded, carefully bagging items to be officially documented. International financial fraud, identity theft, forgery. These are serious federal offenses. But I should warn you, pursuing charges means your family members could face significant prison time. I looked at Folami and Tunde, seeing the weight of this reality in their eyes. Pursuing justice would mean watching their brother being led away in handcuffs, possibly sending him to prison for years. They made their choice, Folami said firmly, surprising me with her resolve. They stole from their own family. They should face the consequences. Tunde nodded in agreement, though his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. What they did was wrong, really wrong. I took both their hands in mine. This will be painful for all of us. But the alternative, letting them get away with this, would poison our family forever. There is one more thing to consider, Agent Chen added, her expression grave. Your husband's death was ruled a heart attack, but given the timing and circumstances, you think he was murdered? Ikon asked sharply. I'm not suggesting anything specific, Agent Chen replied carefully. But when financial crimes of this magnitude come to light, it's standard procedure to review any deaths connected to the case. Francis had a heart condition, I said, feeling defensive despite everything. He'd been on medication for years. We'll obtain the medical records and review the autopsy findings, Agent Chen assured me. It's simply due diligence. After the FBI agents left with our evidence, I sat on the porch with Ikon, watching the last light fade from the sky. The house behind us was quieter than it had been in years, with Folami and Tunde finally sleeping after days of shock and grief. I asked Ikon quietly, the question I'd been afraid to voice now finding its way into the darkness between us. Could someone have helped Francis's heart attack along? I don't know, sister, Ikon replied, his voice heavy. Francis was secretive at the end. Perhaps he threatened to expose the others. Perhaps they feared he would back out. Kemi was giving him his medication, I remembered suddenly. She insisted on it, said I was too busy with work to remember the proper schedule. The thought that my own sister might have had a hand in my husband's death sent a chill through me, unlike anything I'd felt before. We sat in silence after that, the magnitude of what we faced settling over us like a shroud. The next morning brought another revelation. I received a call from our family attorney, a man we'd worked with for years. Mrs. Okafor, I'm deeply sorry for your loss, he began, his tone formal and uncomfortable. I'm calling because there's something you should know about your husband's life insurance policy. What about it? I asked, suddenly alert. It was changed 3 months ago. The primary beneficiary is no longer you, but a corporation called D&K Holdings. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Francis had redirected his $500,000 life insurance policy to the company he'd established with Dio and Kemi. Even in death, he had planned to continue the betrayal. Is there any way to challenge this? I asked, gripping the phone tightly. Given the evidence of fraud you've uncovered, yes. I've already filed a preliminary injunction to prevent the payout pending investigation. After hanging up, I shared this latest discovery with the others. Folami slammed her fist against the wall, her anger finally breaking through her controlled exterior. They were going to take everything, she said, tears streaming down her face. Even Dad's life insurance. What kind of people do this to their own family? I had no answer for her. I was still struggling to reconcile the people I thought I knew with the callous thieves the evidence revealed them to be. Later that day, we received unexpected visitors. Francis's parents from Nigeria arrived a day earlier than planned for the funeral, only to find they had missed it due to flight delays. Mama Okafor, I greeted my mother-in-law at the door, embracing the small, dignified woman who had always treated me like a daughter. I'm so sorry about the funeral. We didn't know your flight was changed. The airlines are never reliable, she said, her accent thick, but her English perfect. But we are here now, to mourn our son and support you. Papa Okafor, Francis's stepfather who had raised him since age 10 after his biological father's death, stood solemnly behind his wife. Though not related by blood to the Okafor inheritance dispute, he had always been considered family. I hesitated, unsure how much to tell these grieving parents about their son's betrayal. But Ikon had no such reservations. They need to know, he insisted. This affects the entire family. Over tea in the living room, we revealed everything. The stolen inheritance, the forged documents, the offshore accounts. With each revelation, Mama Okafor's face grew more drawn, more pained. I cannot believe my son would do this, she whispered, her hands trembling around her teacup. To steal from his own father's legacy. The evidence is clear, Mama, Econ said gently. Francis betrayed us all. To my surprise, Papa Okafor's response was not disbelief, but grim resignation. I suspected something was wrong, he admitted. When we spoke last month, Francis avoided all questions about the estate. He changed the subject, became angry when I pressed. Did you notice anything else unusual? Agent Chen asked, having returned that afternoon with more questions. Papa Okafor considered this carefully. Yes, he mentioned feeling threatened by someone. He said, if anything happens to me, look to the money. I thought he was being dramatic. But now, this statement cast a new shadow over Francis's death. If he had felt threatened, had expressed concern about his safety, could his heart attack truly have been natural? We need the toxicology reports expedited, Agent Chen said, stepping outside to make a call. While we waited for her to return, Mama Okafor pulled me aside, her eyes full of sorrow and determination. Amara, there is something else you should know, she said quietly. Something about Kemi. What about her? I asked, bracing myself for yet another betrayal. 5 years ago, when she claimed to divorce Joseph, it was not true. They separated briefly after he was arrested for financial fraud in Lagos, but they reconciled when the charges were dropped. Joseph has been living in their house in Victoria Island all this time. This confirmed what the investigator had discovered. My sister's divorce, her need to move in with us, had been entirely fabricated, likely the first step in a long-term plan to gain access to our finances. The FBI has located Dio, Agent Chen announced upon her return. He attempted to board a flight to Dubai this morning. They're bringing him in for questioning now. And Kemi? I asked. Still missing, but we have alerts at all airports and border crossings. She can't have gone far without us knowing. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. Sister, please meet me. I can explain everything. Come alone or you'll never see me again. It included an address for a coffee shop downtown. Against everyone's advice, I decided to go. Agent Chen insisted on having agents nearby, but agreed to let me enter alone, wearing a recording device. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few students with laptops and a barista scrolling through her phone. In the furthest corner sat Kemi, her hair hidden under a scarf, large sunglasses covering half her face despite the indoor setting. Amara, she said as I sat across from her, her voice both familiar and strange. Thank you for coming. Why Kemi? I asked, getting straight to the point. We were sisters. I trusted you with everything. She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes red from crying or lack of sleep, perhaps both. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Francis promised no one would get hurt. The plan was simple. Just take what the family in Nigeria would never miss. Money they didn't even know existed. Money that wasn't yours to take, I reminded her. And don't pretend this was Francis's idea alone. I've seen the evidence, Kemi. You and Dio were equal partners in this. She looked down at her untouched coffee. Joseph needed the money. He's in trouble with dangerous people in Lagos. When Francis approached me with the plan, it seemed like the perfect solution. Joseph, your husband who you claimed to have divorced 5 years ago. Kemi flinched. I'm sorry for that lie. Joseph thought it would be easier to access the Okafor money if I was living in your house. I never wanted to hurt you, Amara. You're my sister. Sisters don't steal from each other, I said, my voice hard. Sisters don't help steal $800,000 from their nieces and nephews. Dio was supposed to make sure you and the children were taken care of, she insisted. That was the agreement. Half for us, half for you, half of stolen money. How generous. The bitterness in my voice was new, a tone I'd never used with my sister before. Kemi leaned forward, desperation in her eyes. Francis is gone. The FBI is closing in. I need your help, Amara. If you speak for me, tell them I was manipulated. No, I cut her off. I will not lie for you. You knew exactly what you were doing every step of the way. They'll send me to prison, she cried, drawing glances from the few other patrons. You should have thought of that before you stole from your own family, I replied, standing up to leave. If you turn yourself in, cooperate fully, maybe the judge will show leniency. Amara, please. She grabbed my wrist. I'm your sister. Your blood. Doesn't that count for anything? I looked down at her. This woman I'd loved and trusted my entire life, now revealed as someone I never truly knew. Family is more than blood, Kemi. It's trust. It's honor. It's putting others before yourself. You and Francis and Dio, you forgot what family really means. I pulled my arm free and walked out, hearing her desperate calls behind me but not turning back. Outside, Agent Chen was waiting in an unmarked car. We got it all, she confirmed, indicating the recording. And we have officers moving in to take her into custody now. I nodded, watching through the window as 2 plainclothes officers entered the coffee shop. Whatever happened next, I couldn't bring myself to witness it. My sister had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, financial investigations, and painful revelations. Dio, arrested while attempting to flee the country, initially maintained his innocence, claiming he was merely following his father's instructions without understanding the full implications. This facade crumbled when faced with the evidence. Emails in his own words detailing the scheme, bank transfers he had personally authorized, forged signatures in his handwriting. Eventually, he agreed to cooperate in exchange for consideration during sentencing. His confession, recorded in a sterile interview room at the FBI field office, was perhaps the most painful thing I've ever had to watch. It started small, Dio explained, his voice hollow. Dad approached me after grandfather fell ill. He said there was money in the estate that no one would miss. Funds that weren't officially documented. He called it creative accounting, not stealing. And you believe that? The interviewer asked. Dio shrugged. I wanted to believe it. I had gambling debts from online poker. I'd been hiding them for months, taking out private loans at crazy interest rates. Dad found out when one of the loan sharks showed up at the office. So this was your father's idea? Initially, yes. But He hesitated, glancing toward the observation window where he knew I was watching. I suggested bringing Aunt Kemi in. She had connections to Nigerian banks through Uncle Joseph. She knew how to move money without raising flags. Every word felt like a knife in my heart. My son had not been led astray. He had been an architect of the scheme, expanding it from simple theft to a sophisticated international fraud operation. Kemi's testimony, given after her arrest at the coffee shop, painted a similar picture. She admitted to facilitating the transfers, to maintaining the deception about her divorce, to helping establish the shell companies that hid the stolen funds. Joseph had debts, she explained, as if that justified everything. Gambling, failed investments. People were threatening him. When Francis approached me with this plan, it seemed like the only way out. But the most damning revelation came when the expedited toxicology report on Francis's body was completed. Agent Chen arrived at the house one evening with the results, her expression grave. Mrs. Okafor, the medical examiner found elevated levels of digoxin in your husband's blood, far higher than his prescribed dosage. Digoxin? I repeated, the word familiar from my nursing training. That's his heart medication. Yes. In appropriate doses, it treats heart conditions. In excessive amounts, it can cause cardiac arrest that mimics a natural heart attack. The implication was clear. Someone had tampered with Francis's medication, turning a therapeutic drug into a lethal dose. Was he murdered? Tunde asked, his young voice breaking. Agent Chen chose her words carefully. The evidence suggests his death was not entirely natural. We're treating this as a suspicious death pending further investigation. Who had access to his medication? Folemi asked, her face pale. Kemi, I whispered, remembering how my sister had insisted on managing Francis's pills. She gave him his medication every morning. But subsequent interrogation revealed an even more complex picture. Under intense questioning, Kemi admitted to increasing Francis's medication, but claimed it wasn't meant to be lethal. He was threatening to expose us, she said, tears streaming down her face. He'd received calls from the family in Nigeria, questions he couldn't answer. He said he was going to come clean, return the money. We would have all gone to prison. So you decided to kill him? Agent Chen asked bluntly. No, I just wanted to make him sick enough to delay any decisions, to buy us time to move the remaining money. I didn't mean for him to die. Whether this was truth or another of Kemi's manipulations, we might never know. The fact remained that she had deliberately tampered with life-saving medication, resulting in Francis's death. The charge was upgraded from fraud to manslaughter. But there was yet another twist awaiting us. As the FBI traced the movement of the stolen funds, they uncovered transactions that made no sense. Regular payments from the D&K Holdings account to a woman named Chiamaka Okafor. I don't know anyone by that name. I told Agent Chen when she showed me the records. Is she related to Francis's family? That's what we're trying to determine, she replied. The payments have been going to an address in Detroit for approximately 5 years. Monthly transfers of $3,000. Econ looked equally puzzled. There's no Chiamaka in our family that I know of. The answer came from an unexpected source. During a follow-up interview, when confronted with these transactions, Dio broke down completely. Chiamaka is Dad's daughter, he confessed, unable to meet the interviewer's eyes. His daughter with Nkichi. The woman he was having an affair with? Agent Chen clarified. Yes, she got pregnant 7 years ago. Dad has been supporting them in secret ever since. Mom never knew. I felt as if the floor had fallen away beneath me. A child. Francis had another child, a daughter who would be about 6 years old now. A daughter he had supported financially while keeping her existence completely secret from me and our children. When I received this information, I excused myself from the room where we'd been meeting with the investigators. I walked out into the backyard to the garden I had so carefully tended for years, and screamed. I screamed until my voice gave out, releasing years of betrayal, shock, and grief in one primal outpouring. Folami found me there, sitting silently among the flowers when my voice was gone. Without speaking, she sat beside me and took my hand. I want to meet her, she said after a long silence. My half-sister. She's innocent in all this. She deserves to know her siblings. I looked at my daughter. So strong, so moral, so much better than her father had been, and felt a surge of fierce pride through my pain. Yes, I agreed, my voice hoarse. We'll find her. When this is all over, we'll find her. As the case progressed, more financial details emerged. Of the approximately $800,000 stolen from the Okafor estate, about $300,000 had already been spent on Dio's gambling debts, on property purchases in Lagos, on supporting Joseph's failing business ventures, and on Francis's secret second family. The remaining $500,000 had been frozen in various accounts. With proper legal action, this money could potentially be recovered and returned to the estate, but the process would be long and complicated, involving courts in multiple countries. The most painful revelation came from Francis's laptop, a document titled Final Arrangements, created just 1 week before his death. It detailed his plans for after the theft was complete. Divorce me once Dio was established in the business, move Nkechi and their daughter to America, and start a new life with his second family using the stolen funds. He was planning to abandon us entirely, Folami said, her voice tight with rage as we reviewed the document together. After everything you did for him, everything you built together. He's not the man I thought I married, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Perhaps he never was. Tunda, who had been quieter than usual throughout this process, finally spoke up. Mom, do you think Dad ever loved us at all? The question broke my heart anew. How could I answer this? How could I explain to my children that their father had been two people, the loving parent they remembered, and the calculating thief revealed after his death? I believe he did love us in his way, I said carefully. People are complicated, Tunda. They can love and still do terrible things. They can care about their children and still make selfish choices. Whether my son found comfort in these words, I couldn't tell. He nodded slightly and returned to the computer program he'd been writing. An attempt, he'd told me, to create a system that would trace the remaining missing funds. As we approached the preliminary hearing for Dio and Kemi, Agent Chen brought news that Joseph Ademola had been arrested in Lagos, attempting to sell one of the properties purchased with the stolen funds. Nigerian authorities were cooperating fully, freezing assets and preparing their own charges. The case against all of them is strong, she assured me. Between the documentary evidence, the financial records, and their own confessions. Conviction is almost certain. And what kind of sentences are they looking at? I asked, needing to prepare myself and the children for what was to come. For the financial crimes alone, 5 to 10 years. With the manslaughter charge against Kemi, she hesitated. That could add another 10 to 15. I nodded, the reality sinking in. My sister and son would likely spend years in prison. The family I had known was gone forever, shattered by greed and lies. What about Nkechi and her daughter? I asked. Will they face charges too? Nkechi is being investigated for her role in facilitating the financial transactions. As for the child, she's a minor and a victim in this situation. Child Services in Michigan has been notified, but no action has been taken yet. That night, I sat with Folami and Tunde in our living room, the house quieter than it had ever been with so many absent. I want you both to know, I said, choosing my words carefully, that whatever happens with the legal proceedings, we will rebuild our lives. We will find a way forward. Will we stay in this house? Tunde asked, looking around at the home that now held so many painful memories. I don't know, I admitted. There's a lot to consider. Practical issues, financial realities. The firm is in chaos without your father and brother. The hospital has given me extended leave, but eventually I'll need to return to work. We should sell this place, Folami said decisively. Too many ghosts. We can find somewhere new, somewhere without all these memories. I nodded, seeing the wisdom in her words. That might be best, but no decisions need to be made immediately. What about Chiamaka? Tunde asked. Will she come live with us? That depends on many factors, I explained. Her mother's legal situation, what's best for her, what she wants. But yes, I intend to make sure she knows she has family who care about her, regardless of the circumstances of her birth. Folami squeezed my hand. You're a better person than I could be, Mom. I don't know if I could offer that to Dad's. To his other child. She's your sister, I said simply. And she's innocent in all of this, just as you are. As we sat together, bound by both blood and shared trauma, I realized that from the ashes of this betrayal, a different kind of family was emerging, smaller, wounded, but perhaps ultimately stronger for having survived the fire. The preliminary hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in early March, 6 weeks after Francis's funeral. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. The story of a prominent Nigerian-American family torn apart by fraud, theft, and potential murder had captured public attention. I entered through a side door with Folami and Tunde, guided by our attorneys. Ekon and his wife had flown in from Lagos to attend, as had several other members of the extended Okafor family. Even Papa and Mama Okafor had delayed their return to Nigeria to be present. The courtroom was already full when we entered. And there, for the first time since the funeral, I saw Dio and Kemi in person. They sat at separate tables with their respective lawyers, neither looking at the other. Both appeared diminished somehow. Dio's usual confident posture replaced by slumped shoulders. Kemi's fashionable appearance now reduced to a plain navy suit and unstyled hair. When Dio saw us, he straightened slightly, his eyes seeking mine with a desperation that nearly broke my resolve. I held his gaze for a moment before looking away. Whatever he needed, forgiveness, understanding, reassurance, I couldn't provide it. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Kemi didn't look our way at all, her eyes fixed on her hands folded on the table before her. The sister who had shared my childhood, who had held my hand through labor with each of my children, who had lived in my home for 5 years, couldn't even face me now. The hearing itself was procedural. Formal reading of charges, entering of pleas, setting of trial dates. Dio pleaded guilty to reduced charges of fraud and conspiracy in exchange for his cooperation. Kemi pleaded not guilty to all charges, including the manslaughter count. As the proceedings continued, I noticed a woman I didn't recognize sitting in the back row, her face partially obscured by large sunglasses despite the indoor setting. Something about her posture, the way she leaned forward whenever Dio spoke, caught my attention. When the judge called a brief recess, the woman stood and headed for the exit. Acting on instinct, I followed her. "Excuse me," I called when we reached the hallway. "Are you Nkechi?" She froze, then slowly turned to face me, Removing her sunglasses revealed an attractive woman in her mid-30s, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Mrs. Okafor," she acknowledged, her Nigerian accent subtle but present. "I wasn't sure you'd recognize me." "I've seen photos," I said, keeping my voice neutral despite the turmoil inside me. This was the woman Francis had betrayed me with for years, the mother of his secret child. "I'm sorry," she said, the words seeming inadequate for the magnitude of the situation. "I never intended—" "Is Chimaka with you in Chicago?" I interrupted, not interested in her apologies or justifications. She looked startled by the question. "No, she's with my sister in Detroit." "I would like to meet her," I said firmly. "She's my children's sister. She deserves to know her family." Nkechi's composure cracked slightly, tears welling in her eyes. "You would do that? After everything? This isn't about you or Francis or what you did. This is about an innocent child who didn't ask to be born into this situation." She nodded slowly. "When the trial is over. If I don't go to jail." "Regardless of what happens to you," I clarified. "Chiamaka needs to know she has family who care about her." Before she could respond, Agent Chen appeared beside me. "Mrs. Okafor, they're about to reconvene." I nodded, turning back to Nkechi. "My lawyer will contact you. We'll make arrangements." As we walked back to the courtroom, Agent Chen gave me a questioning look. "Francis's mistress," I explained briefly, "the mother of his other child." "You're a stronger woman than most," she observed. "Not many would reach out like that." "It's not strength," I corrected her. "It's necessity. That little girl is as much a victim in this as my children. She deserves better than to lose her father and mother in one fell swoop." The remainder of the hearing proceeded quickly. Trial dates were set for 3 months hence. Dio was remanded to custody despite his lawyer's plea for bail, the judge citing flight risk given his previous attempt to leave the country. Kemi, to my surprise, was granted bail with electronic monitoring, her lawyer having successfully argued she had no prior criminal record and limited access to resources that might facilitate escape. As we left the courthouse, a reporter thrust a microphone toward me. "Mrs. Okafor, how does it feel to see your son and sister facing prison for stealing from your family?" I nearly ignored the question, but something made me pause. Perhaps it was the realization that hiding from this story was futile, or perhaps it was simply exhaustion with secrets and lies. "It feels like the culmination of a tragedy," I said, my voice steady. "One that has cost me my husband, my son, my sister, and nearly destroyed everything my family built. But we will survive this. We will rebuild, and perhaps, in time, we will find a way to forgive." Falami squeezed my hand as cameras flashed around us. Tunda, still shy of the media attention, pressed closer to my side. Together we made our way to the waiting car, heads high despite the weight of public scrutiny. That evening, as we gathered in the living room with Ekon and his wife, an unexpected visitor arrived, Kemi's ex-husband, or perhaps current husband, given the revelations about their fraudulent divorce. Joseph Ademola, freshly extradited from Nigeria and currently in FBI custody. "He's asking to speak with you," Agent Chen explained. "Says he has information that could help recover more of the missing funds." "Why would he help us now?" Ekon asked skeptically. "His situation in Nigeria is precarious," Agent Chen replied. "He's facing serious charges there. His best hope is cooperation with authorities here." I agreed to speak with him, though I insisted on having Agent Chen and our attorney present. Joseph was brought to a small interview room at the FBI field office, his hands cuffed to a metal ring embedded in the table. The man before me bore little resemblance to the charming, successful businessman Kemi had introduced to the family years ago. His designer suits had been replaced by prison garb, his confident smile by a guarded expression that couldn't quite hide his fear. "Amara," he began, attempting familiarity. "Thank you for coming." "Mrs. Okafor," I corrected him coldly. "I'm told you have information about the stolen funds." He nodded, dropping the pretense of friendly relations. "There's more money than what you've found so far." Francis established additional accounts under different company names, accounts that Dio and Kemi don't know about. "How do you know about them if they don't?" Agent Chen asked. "Because Francis and I had our own arrangement," Joseph admitted. He needed someone with banking connections in Lagos who wouldn't ask questions. I provided that service for a percentage. You betrayed Kemi? I asked, surprised despite everything I'd learned about the depths of deception in this case. Joseph laughed bitterly. Kemi and I betrayed each other regularly. Our marriage has been a business arrangement for years. She used me for my banking connections. I used her for her family ties to the Okafors. He proceeded to reveal details of accounts in Cayman Islands and Switzerland, properties purchased under false names, and investments made with stolen funds that Dio and Kemi had never been informed about. Francis was playing his own game, Joseph explained. He was using them as much as they were using you. How much? Our lawyer asked sharply. How much more was he hiding? At least $400,000, Joseph replied. Possibly more. Francis was very careful, very methodical. He kept records of everything, but in code. There should be a black ledger in his personal possessions, separate from the business accounts. After Joseph was returned to custody, I sat with Agent Chen and our lawyer, processing this new information. If he's telling the truth, there could be significantly more funds to recover, the lawyer noted, though finding and repatriating money from Swiss accounts is notoriously difficult. The black ledger he mentioned, I said slowly. I think I know what he's referring to. Francis kept a journal he called his legacy book. I always assumed it was a record of advice for the children, business wisdom he wanted to pass down. We returned to the house immediately, and I led them to Francis's closet, where, behind a false panel in the back wall, he had kept his most private possessions, his father's watch, photos from his childhood, and the leather-bound book I had seen him writing in late at night. The journal, when opened, revealed not fatherly advice but detailed records of accounts, investments, and properties, all documented in a simple substitution cipher that Agent Chen's cryptography team quickly decoded. This is it, she confirmed after preliminary analysis. Records of everything. Accounts we didn't know existed, properties purchased under aliases, investments made with stolen funds. If this information is accurate, we may be able to recover close to $1 million. The discovery of these additional hidden assets added new charges to the case against Dio and Kemi, though their lawyers argued they had been unaware of Francis's separate scheme. Whether this was true or merely a convenient defense was difficult to determine, but the evidence suggested Francis had indeed kept certain aspects of his fraud hidden even from his co-conspirators. As the weeks passed and the trial approached, our lives settled into a new uncomfortable rhythm. I returned to work at the hospital, finding solace in the structured environment and the focus required by my responsibilities. Folami threw herself into her studies, while Tunde retreated further into his computer programming, developing sophisticated tracking algorithms that he insisted would help find any remaining hidden funds. We had decided to sell the house, finding the memories too painful to live with daily. A smaller home closer to the hospital was under contract. The move planned for after the trial concluded. One evening, as I was sorting through Francis's possessions in preparation for the move, Folami found me sitting on the floor of his closet, surrounded by suits I was boxing up for donation. "Mom," she said softly, sitting beside me. "I've been thinking about Chimaka." "So have I admitted. I've been in contact with Nkichi's sister. We're arranging a meeting next month." "I want to come with you," Folami said decisively. "She should know she has a sister who wants to be part of her life." I looked at my daughter, marveling at her capacity for compassion in the midst of her own pain. "Are you sure? It won't be easy." "None of this is easy," she replied with a wisdom beyond her years. "But she's family, whether we wanted this situation or not." As we sat together among the remnants of Francis's life, I realized that despite everything, the betrayal, the theft, the lies, something valuable had emerged from the wreckage. My children were showing a strength of character, a moral clarity that gave me hope for the future. The night before the trial was scheduled to begin, I received an unexpected call from Kemi's attorney. "Mrs. Okafor, my client would like to speak with you privately. She's prepared to offer information that could significantly impact the case." "I've heard all of Kemi's explanations," I replied wearily. "I don't need more excuses or justifications." "This is different," the attorney insisted. She's ready to take full responsibility for certain aspects of the case that could affect your son's sentencing. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet Kemi the next morning before court proceedings began. When I arrived at the attorney's office, Kemi was seated alone in a conference room, looking even more diminished than she had at the preliminary hearing. "Amara," she said as I entered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming." I remained standing, unwilling to settle into what promised to be a difficult conversation. "Your attorney said you have information." "I'm listening." Kemi nodded, visibly gathering her courage. "I'm going to plead guilty to all charges tomorrow, including the manslaughter charge for tampering with Francis's medication." This was unexpected. Kemi had maintained her innocence of the most serious charge from the beginning, insisting she had only meant to make Francis ill, not kill him. "Why the change of heart?" I asked skeptically. "Because it's true," she said simply. "I did increase his medication deliberately. I knew the risks. I told myself it was just to incapacitate him temporarily. But the truth is, I didn't care if he died. He was threatening to expose everything, to return the money, to turn himself in. Joseph had debts to dangerous people. If the money disappeared, they would have killed him, and possibly me." "So you decided Francis should die instead," I said, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Kemi replied, tears streaming down her face. "I don't deserve it. But Dio doesn't deserve to spend years in prison for something he didn't know about. Dio was a willing participant in stealing from his own family," I reminded her. "In the theft, yes. Not in his father's death. He knew nothing about the medication. That was between me and Francis." I studied my sister's face, searching for the manipulation I had come to expect from her. But all I saw was exhaustion and a kind of desperate honesty. "I've given my attorney a full confession," she continued, when I remained silent. "It details my sole responsibility for Francis's death. Dio was involved in the fraud, yes, but not the manslaughter. If this helps reduce his sentence, then at least one good thing will come from my confession." "Why now, Kemi? Why not when you were first arrested?" She looked down at her hands, folded tightly on the table. "Fear. Selfishness. The same things that drove me to participate in this scheme in the first place. But I've had time to think, to really see what I've done. To Francis, to you, to the children. I can't change any of it, but I can at least tell the truth now." I wasn't sure what to feel in that moment. Relief that Dio might face a lesser sentence, gratitude for Kemi's belated honesty, or simply exhaustion with the entire tragic situation. "I'll never understand how you could do this," I said finally. "How you could betray me so completely. We were sisters, Kemi. I trusted you with everything." "I'll never understand how you could do this," I said finally. "How you could betray me so completely. We were sisters, Kemi. I trusted you with everything." "I know," she whispered, "and there's nothing I can say to make it right. I chose money over family. I chose Joseph over you. I chose the wrong things, over and over. And now I've lost everything that truly mattered." I stood to leave, unable to bear any more of this conversation. At the door, I paused. "I'll make sure your confession is considered in Dio's case," I said, not turning to look at her. "Beyond that, I can promise nothing." The trial began the next morning with a shocking development. Kemi's change of plea to guilty on all charges, including the manslaughter of Francis. Her full confession was entered into evidence, detailing her deliberate tampering with his medication and her sole responsibility for his death. The prosecutor approached Dio's attorney during the first recess, offering a revised plea deal in light of Kemi's confession. The manslaughter conspiracy charges were dropped, leaving only the financial crimes. His potential sentence was reduced from 15-20 years to 5 to 7 years with possibility of parole. When court resumed, Dio accepted the new deal, officially pleading guilty to fraud, conspiracy, and theft. The judge set sentencing for the following month and remanded him to custody. As the bailiff led Dio away, he looked back at me, his face a mask of regret and fear. This grown man, my firstborn son, suddenly looked like the little boy who had once run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting me to fix everything. But some things couldn't be fixed. Some betrayals cut too deep. Some wounds would never fully heal. As much as I loved my son, as much as I would always love him, I couldn't protect him from the consequences of his own choices. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around us, shouting questions about the sudden plea changes and what it meant for the family. "Mrs. Okafor, do you believe your sister's confession? Do you think she's telling the truth about being solely responsible for your husband's death? Mrs. Okafor, how do you feel about your son accepting a plea deal? Will you support him during his incarceration? Mrs. Okafor, what happens to the inheritance now? Will the money be returned to Nigeria?" I pushed through the crowd without responding, Folami and Tunde close beside me. Ikan and his wife flanked us protectively, creating a buffer between my children and the invasive questions. Back at the house, in the relative quiet of our living room, Folami finally broke down. She had been so strong throughout the trial, so composed, but now she sobbed uncontrollably. "It's really over," she said between gasps. "Daddy's gone. Dayo's going to prison. Aunt Kemi too. Our whole family is just gone." I pulled her close, stroking her hair as I had when she was a child. "Not gone," I corrected gently. "Changed, wounded, but not gone. We're still here, the three of us. We're still family." Tunde joined our embrace, his lanky teenage frame somehow still able to fit against my side as if he were much younger. "And Uncle Ikon," he added. "And our cousins in Nigeria. And Chiamaka." I nodded, acknowledging the expansion of our concept of family to include this child we had yet to meet. "Yes, our family is different now, but it's not gone. It's just reconfigured." That night, after the children had finally fallen into exhausted sleep, I sat alone on the back porch, looking up at the stars. The same stars shone over Lagos, over Detroit where Francis's other daughter slept, over the detention centers where Dayo and Kemi awaited sentencing. The universe was vast and indifferent to our human dramas. Stars died and were born, galaxies collided and reformed, while we struggled with our tiny betrayals and griefs. There was something comforting in that perspective, the reminder that in the grand scheme, even this enormous pain was temporary, one chapter in a much longer story. Agent Chen called the next morning with news. "Mrs. Okafor, we've located additional accounts based on the information in Francis's ledger. We've frozen approximately $450,000 in assets, with another $200,000 potentially recoverable." "That's good news," I said, struggling to feel anything beyond numb resignation at this point. "There's something else," she continued, her tone changing. "The team analyzing Francis's communications found evidence that Nkechi Okonkwo may have been more involved than we initially believed. There are emails suggesting she helped establish some of the hidden accounts that even Dayo and Kemi didn't know about. What does that mean for her legally? We're still building the case, but she'll likely face charges similar to those against Dayo: fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. Given her cooperation so far, we might offer a similar plea deal." "And Chiamaka?" I asked, my concern immediately shifting to the child. "That's actually why I'm calling. If Ms. Okonkwo is taken into custody, Child Services will need to place her daughter. Given that you're the child's legal stepmother, even if you didn't know of her existence, you might have a claim to temporary guardianship if you were interested in pursuing that." The suggestion took me by surprise. I had planned to meet Chiamaka, to ensure she knew her siblings, but taking her into my home was something I hadn't considered. I need to think about this," I said honestly, "to discuss it with my children." "Of course," Agent Chen replied. "This is just a preliminary conversation, but if you're interested, my colleagues in Detroit can begin the paperwork." That evening, I sat Folami and Tunde down for a family meeting. I explained the situation with Nkechi and the possibility that Chiamaka might need a home. "She could stay with us," Folami said immediately, her compassion once again shining through. "She's already lost her father. She shouldn't lose her mother and be placed with strangers too." Tunde was more hesitant. "Would she live here? In this house?" "We're selling this house, remember?" I reminded him gently. "We'd all be in the new place. And this would be temporary, at least at first, until we see how things develop with Nkechi's case." "She's 6, right?" Tunde asked, thinking it through. "That's really young. She's going to be scared and confused." "Yes," I agreed. "Which is why she needs people who care about her, even if we're still strangers to her right now. Tunda nodded slowly. Then we should help her. She's family, even if we just found out about her. The decision made, I contacted Agent Chen to begin the process. Given the unusual circumstances, there would be hurdles to overcome, but the FBI's involvement helped expedite matters. Chiamaka would remain with Nkechi's sister until Nkechi was formally charged, at which point we would travel to Detroit to meet the child and potentially bring her home with us. 2 days later, I received an unexpected visitor at the hospital, Joseph Adamola, accompanied by 2 federal agents. He had been granted a supervised visit as part of his ongoing cooperation. "Amara," he greeted me, looking decidedly uncomfortable in his handcuffs. "Thank you for seeing me." "Make it quick, Joseph," I replied, unwilling to spend more time than necessary in his presence. "I have patients waiting. I wanted to tell you about Kemi," he said, glancing at the agents who stood at a discreet distance. "She's not well. The prison doctor says she's showing signs of severe depression." "And what do you expect me to do about that?" I asked, my voice harder than I intended. "Visit her," he said simply. "She doesn't expect forgiveness. She doesn't even expect kindness, but she's still your sister, and she's suffering. She caused immeasurable suffering to my family," I reminded him. "She helped kill my husband." Joseph looked down at his cuffed hands. "I know, and I share in that guilt. We all made terrible choices driven by greed and fear. But Kemi, she's always loved you, even when she betrayed you. That contradiction is breaking her now." I said nothing, unwilling to commit to anything while facing the man who had been complicit in destroying my family. "Just think about it," Joseph said, as the agents prepared to lead him away. "That's all I ask. Think about visiting her, just once." After he left, I found myself unable to focus on my work, Joseph's words echoing in my mind. Kemi had been my sister for 48 years. We had shared childhood secrets, teenage heartbreaks, adult triumphs. Before this betrayal, she had been my closest friend, my confidant, my support through every challenge. Could I really turn my back on her completely? The question haunted me through the day and into the evening. When I returned home, I found Falami waiting up for me, a serious expression on her young face. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting down my purse and kicking off my shoes. "I spoke with Nkechi's sister today," she said. "About Chiamaka. And? She's told Chiamaka that her father died, but not about us yet. She thinks it might be too much all at once. But she sent this." Falami handed me her phone, showing a photo of a little girl with Francis's eyes and smile, dressed in a bright yellow dress, her hair in neat braids. "She's beautiful," I whispered, studying the face of this child who was undeniably an Okafor. "Her aunt says she's smart, loves to draw, and talks about being a doctor someday," Falami added with a small smile. "Reminds me of someone else I know." I looked up at my daughter, marveling at her capacity for acceptance in the face of such complicated emotions. "You're an extraordinary young woman, Falami. I hope you know that." She shrugged, embarrassed by the praise. "I'm just doing what's right. It's not her fault how she came into the world." That night, I lay awake thinking about the children, my 3, who had suffered such profound betrayal from the adults who should have protected them, and Francis's 4th, who had never even had the chance to know her father properly. Whatever mistakes the adults had made, whatever crimes they had committed, these children deserved better. And perhaps, I realized with reluctance, that meant I needed to find a way to maintain some connection with Kemi and Dio, despite their betrayal. Not for them, but for the children who still needed to believe that family could mean something beyond betrayal and loss. The next morning, I called the detention center and arranged a visit with Kemi. Seeing my sister in a prison jumpsuit, separated by glass, her vibrant beauty diminished by institutional lighting and obvious despair, was jarring. She picked up the phone on her side of the barrier with trembling hands. "Amara," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't think you'd come." "Neither did I admitted. "But here I am. How are the children?" she asked, hunger for news of the outside world evident in her eyes. "Struggling," I replied honestly. "Falami is throwing herself into her studies. Tundi is quiet, spends most of his time on his computer. They're resilient, but this has scarred them deeply. Kemi nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, Amara. I know those words are meaningless after what I did, but I am truly, deeply sorry. I didn't come for apologies, I said, keeping my voice steady. I came because, despite everything, you're still my sister, and because the children need to know that family can survive even the worst betrayals. I don't deserve your compassion, she whispered. This isn't about what you deserve, I replied. It's about what I need to do to help my children heal, to help myself heal. I can't move forward carrying hatred, even if it's justified. What about forgiveness? She asked tentatively. I don't know if I'll ever get there, I said honestly, but I'm here. That's all I can offer right now. We talked for the remaining 20 minutes of the allotted visiting time, not about the case or the betrayal, but about simpler things. Memories of our childhood in Lagos, stories of the children growing up, fragments of a shared history that existed alongside the pain of recent events. When the guard signaled that time was up, Kemi pressed her palm against the glass. After a moment's hesitation, I raised my hand to match hers, separated by the barrier but connected by the gesture. I'll come again, I said, surprising myself with the promise. Not soon, but eventually. The following week brought the sentencing hearings. Kemi received 15 years for manslaughter and fraud, with possibility of parole after 10 years. Her full confession and cooperation had earned her some leniency from the judge, though the sentence was still substantial. Dio received 6 years for his role in the financial crimes, with eligibility for parole after 4 years with good behavior. As he was led from the courtroom, he looked back at me one last time. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, his voice breaking. I love you. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Despite everything, he was still my son, my firstborn, and watching him being led away in handcuffs broke something inside me that I wasn't sure could ever be fully repaired. Joseph received 8 years for his role in the fraud, with additional charges pending in Nigeria. Nkechi, as Agent Chen had predicted, was offered a plea deal in exchange for her cooperation. She received 4 years, with eligibility for parole after 2. Before she was taken into custody, arrangements were made for us to meet Chiamaka. We flew to Detroit on a crisp April morning, my heart pounding with anticipation and anxiety. How would this child react to strangers claiming to be family? How would I react to meeting the living evidence of my husband's betrayal? Nkechi's sister Adora lived in a modest but well-kept home in the suburbs of Detroit. She greeted us warmly, her eyes full of compassion for the awkward situation we all found ourselves in. Chiamaka is excited to meet you, she told us as she led us inside. I've explained that you're her father's wife and her half-siblings. She has questions, of course, but she's a remarkably adaptable child. Chiamaka was waiting in the living room, wearing the yellow dress from the photo, her hands clasped nervously in her lap. When she saw us, her eyes widened, fixing immediately on Tunde. You look like my daddy, she said with the directness only children can manage. Tunde smiled, kneeling down to her level. I know. People say I have his eyes. You do too. Are you really my brother? She asked, still studying his face. Yes, he replied simply. I am. And this is your sister Falami, and this is Amara, your father's wife. Chiamaka considered this information carefully, then looked up at me. My mommy says you didn't know about me, that it was a secret. I knelt beside Tunde, meeting the child's gaze. That's right. It was a secret, and I was very surprised to learn about you. But I'm very glad to meet you now. Are you mad at me? She asked, her voice small. No, I said firmly, reaching out to take her small hand. Not at all. None of this is your fault. You're a child, and all of us, me, Falami, Tunde, we all want to make sure you're okay. Mommy has to go away for a while, Chiamaka said, her face solemn. Auntie Adara says she did something wrong and has to go to time out. That's right, I confirmed, searching for the right words to explain such a complex situation to a 6-year-old. Your mom made some mistakes, and there are consequences for those mistakes. But she loves you very much, and she wants to make sure you're taken care of while she's away. Are you going to take care of me? She asked directly. I glanced at Falami and Tunde, who both nodded encouragingly. If you want us to, I told her honestly. We would like you to come stay with us in Chicago. You would have your own room, and we would help you keep in touch with your mom and with Auntie Adaora. But it's a big change, and it's okay if you're not sure. Chiamaka considered this carefully, with a seriousness that reminded me painfully of Francis when he was working through a difficult problem. Can I bring my drawings? She asked finally. Of course, Falami replied, smiling. I heard you like to draw. I'm not very good at it myself, but I'd love to see what you create. And my books? I have a lot of books. Definitely your books, Tundi assured her. I love books too. Chiamaka nodded, apparently satisfied with our answers. Okay, I'll come with you. But can I still visit Auntie Adaora sometimes? Absolutely, I promised, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Family is important, all parts of it. We spent the rest of the day getting to know Chiamaka, looking at her drawings, reading her favorite books, and answering her questions as honestly as we could without overwhelming her. By evening, she was showing Tunde how to play her favorite card game, while Falami helped Adaora prepare dinner. Watching them together, seeing the easy way Chiamaka had begun to trust my children, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not the naive hope of my previous life, built on false foundations, but a more resilient hope, tempered by pain, but still alive. The legal process to establish temporary guardianship took several more weeks, during which we visited Detroit regularly. By early May, all the paperwork was completed, and Chiamaka joined our household officially. We had moved into the new home by then, a 4-bedroom house closer to the hospital and the university, with a small garden and a fresh start. Life settled into new patterns. I returned to full-time work at the hospital. Falami completed her semester at university with excellent grades despite the trauma of recent months. Tunde finished his junior year of high school and began talking about computer science programs for college. Chiamaka started at a new elementary school, where she quickly made friends and impressed her teachers with her intelligence and creativity. On Saturdays, I took Chiamaka to visit Nkechi at the minimum security facility where she was serving her sentence. On Sundays, we sometimes visited Dio, though these visits were more complicated emotionally for all of us. Once a month, I kept my promise and visited Kemi, usually alone, our conversations gradually becoming less strained, though never approaching the easy intimacy we had once shared. The recovery of the stolen funds progressed slowly but steadily. By the end of the year, approximately $900,000 had been recovered and returned to the Okafor estate, to be divided as originally intended among Francis's siblings. I waived my claim to any portion, feeling the money was tainted by too much pain and betrayal. Instead, I established trust funds for all 4 children, Dio, Falami, Tunde, and Chiamaka, using the life insurance money that had been successfully redirected back to me as the rightful beneficiary. Each would receive their portion upon reaching 30 years of age, with provisions for education expenses in the meantime. Francis's mistress's brother in Lagos, who had not been involved in the fraud, helped facilitate the proper distribution of the remaining Nigerian properties among the rightful heirs. Papa and Mama Okafor, though devastated by the revelations about their son, maintained close contact with us, especially developing a warm relationship with Chiamaka, their newly discovered grandchild. 18 months after the fateful day when Francis's coffin had shaken in the chapel, revealing secrets that destroyed the family we had been, I stood in our new garden watching Chiamaka and Tunde planting sunflowers together. Falami sat nearby, reading a medical textbook for her summer courses, occasionally looking up to smile at her siblings' dirt-covered hands and earnest faces. The family I had believed in for 25 years had been an illusion, built on lies, sustained by deception, ultimately destroyed by greed. But from its ashes, something new had emerged. A family bound not by blind trust or false perfection, but by the conscious choice to remain connected, despite knowing the worst about each other. Dio was serving his sentence with exemplary behavior, taking business ethics courses and counseling other inmates. He wrote weekly letters to his siblings, including Chiamaka, gradually building relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. Kemi had become an advocate within the women's prison, using her education to help fellow inmates navigate the legal system and prepare for eventual re-entry to society. Though our relationship would never be what it once was, we had found a way to acknowledge our shared history without allowing it to poison our future. Nkichi and I had developed an unexpected co-parenting relationship, coordinating Chimaka's care and schooling through regular phone calls and visits. The woman I had once viewed only as the embodiment of my husband's betrayal had become, if not a friend, then at least a partner in ensuring her daughter's well-being. As the sun began to set over our garden, casting long shadows across the freshly planted sunflower seeds, Chimaka ran to me with soil-covered hands. "Mama Amara," she called, the name she had chosen for me early in our relationship. "Tunde says the sunflowers will grow taller than him. Is that true?" "It's possible," I told her, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Sunflowers can grow very tall with the right care and conditions. Like people," Tunde added, joining us with his own dirt-stained hands. "We all grow better with the right care and conditions." I looked at my son, no longer a boy but nearly a man now, and marveled at the wisdom he had gained through suffering. "Yes," I agreed. "Exactly like people." Later that evening, after Chimaka had gone to bed, I sat with Folemi and Tunde on our back porch, watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering darkness. "Do you ever wonder what Dad would think of all this?" Folemi asked softly. "Of how we've rebuilt things?" I considered the question carefully. "I think the man I thought I married would be proud of how you both have handled everything, of the compassion you've shown Chiamaka, of the strength you found. But the real Francis, I don't know if he would understand the value of what we've built." "A family based on truth," Tunde said thoughtfully, "even when the truth is painful." "Especially when the truth is painful," I corrected gently. "That's when it matters most." We sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, each lost in our own thoughts. The family we had been was gone forever, destroyed by secrets and lies. But the family we were becoming was stronger in the broken places, held together not by illusions, but by conscious choice and hard-won wisdom. My husband's coffin had shaken, and the truth that emerged had destroyed the family we thought we had. But from the wreckage, we had built something new, something imperfect but real, something that could withstand the tests of time and truth, because it had already survived the worst betrayals imaginable. And in that knowledge, in the peaceful faces of my children gazing up at the emerging stars, I found a measure of peace I had never thought possible in the aftermath of such devastating loss. "We're going to be okay," I said softly, more to myself than to them. Folemi reached over and took my hand. "We already are, Mom. We already are." If you enjoyed this story of betrayal and redemption, please like and subscribe for more family dramas like this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about what you would do if faced with such a shocking revelation. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? Share your experiences below. Thank you for your support. It means the world to me.